I am 91.3 FM WBNY.
We are 91.3 FM WBNY. Buffalo's original alternative. Buffalo's best alternative. And we don't suck.
91.3 FM WBNY Buffalo would like to present Week of the Warriors from 10 p.m. Sunday, March 22nd. We will be having DJs go 24 hours straight for an entire week. That's 7 days to help raise awareness against domestic violence. There will be a ton of interviews, including Glorified Thursday, which will be a day full of bands coming in and playing over the air, just like our glorified rehearsals on the local show. Kicking it off Wednesday night at 10 p.m. with Legion Reed and the Sleepy Ha-Has. Join us for the Week of the Warriors here on 91.3 FM WBNY Buffalo.
91.3 FM WBNY Buffalo, Buffalo's original alternative since 1982, brought to you by the Buffalo State College Student Activity Fee. It's day 2 of the Week of the Warriors, and we are joined starting the day off with Jay, Susan, Ben. Jay, how are you?
Fine, Evan. How are you?
I'm doing well today. Can you tell us who you are, a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. I am the director of Carolyn's House, which is a program of the YWCA of Niagara, and we are transitional housing for homeless women and children.
Okay, so then, branching right off that, what is Carolyn's House?
Carolyn's House is a 19-apartment unit building that provides a safe haven for an at-risk population. So you could be coming from a domestic violence situation or possibly substance abuse recovery, mild mental health, or just need to get on your feet. And it's a safe haven that has programs associated with it to bridge that gap between homelessness and permanent housing.
Mm-hmm. So a lot of the attendants there, the people that are living there, were currently homeless before going in?
They have to be homeless before coming in. And when I say homeless, Evan, I don't necessarily mean living under a bridge. It's homelessness that can be defined as going sofa to sofa, friend's house to friend's house, or living under a bridge, technically, coming from a shelter. So various places like that define homelessness.
Mm-hmm. So then, when thinking about homelessness and situations, how do they usually end up in that situation, and what kind of makes the, I don't want to use the word perfect, but the usual person living there?
How does it make this environment a solid environment for them?
Yeah.
It's probably in the programming that we provide that identifies how they became homeless to begin with. For example, being in a domestic violence situation doesn't necessarily translate to homelessness, but it does talk about an at-risk population. It does talk about an unsafe environment for those that are being abused. And Carolyn's House offers that safe haven. We are a secured facility, 24 hours a day. We have a confidentiality level that we speak to. And then we provide programming and we provide counseling for those in a domestic violence situation.
Mm-hmm. So who can come to Carolyn's House? Is it any gender, any person who's...
Good question. It is a homeless shelter for women and children only. Mm-hmm. So it is a no male visitation site.
Okay, and for obvious reasons that would make, good sense.
It does make good sense because it does create an environment in which there can be a level of security, of feeling like you are in a safe place and that you can move forward and attend various programs that we have here and then move on to permanent housing with yourself or if you have children, with your children.
Mm-hmm. So then, going back to the domestic violence issue, when was the first time you personally thought about domestic violence?
You know what, I'm probably old enough, Evan, that it was never in the forefront when I was a kid growing up. But I saw evidence of it on a college campus many, many years ago. I won't give you the exact number. But saw evidence of it, knew something wasn't quite right, didn't even know what it was when I saw it. But later on, as I became involved with the Y and with the definition of domestic violence, because it doesn't have to be physical, it can be emotional. And an emotional abusive situation can be detrimental not only to the direct recipient of that abuse, but to the children as well if there are children in that environment. Because domestic violence specifically has many dimensions, and it creates an ongoing climate of tension and fear. And that translates to all of those in the household, not just maybe the one person that's being targeted.
The person, say like the child growing up, they see that and they might even learn the the characteristic themselves. They might grow up saying,
And then-
I'll never do that. I can never do that. And then all of a sudden, when they're adults, unfortunately,
they've got the control. It becomes about control, doesn't it? So if they don't have control growing up, if they can't control a safe, a calm environment to grow and develop, then when they get in that position themselves, while they may, in the back of their mind, want to control and have a safe, calm environment, what they know is that they're now in charge. So it becomes repetitive. That's why programs like this are so important, because it raises the profile and the awareness of what domestic violence looks like, and where families can go to grow and hopefully break that chain.
right, because like you said, it's a chain. That's all it is.
It becomes generational without even being aware.
So you mentioned before that they come to Carolyn's house to participate in these programs that help break the cycle. What specific programs are available to the women and children living in Carolyn's house? What programs do they have access to?
Great question. I love this question because, first of all, before I get into specific programs, know that the 19 adult women that are living there, and usually 20 to 30 children that are there as well, the programs that are offered, there are core programs, but then we evolve, and as the women are moving through Carolyn's house and addressing some of their needs, whatever their needs are that we say we don't have a program for, we go and research it and bring it, because if it's in their way of self-sufficiency, if something is in their way of self-sufficiency, then we identify it and we try to bring a program in. So let me start with the core programs. Any woman that comes to Carolyn's house is required to attend financial counseling. We have a budget counselor right on staff who works one-on-one with the women, because if you don't have financial stability and you don't know how, let's face it, some of us were never taught how to even have a checkbook or write a check or pay your bills, or what is priority for taking care of your finances. And if you don't have financial stability, how are you going to be able to move into permanent housing and pay your rent on time? And what are the rules for being a tenant and a good tenant? So we address that as well. We have a speaker series, and every Tuesday, all the residents are required to attend a meeting in the house, and we bring in various speakers to address just specific needs, one-hit needs. They'll come in and they will talk about financial literacy, or they'll talk about women's health, or how to be a better tenant, how to interview. I mean, that's a whole different, the whole job research part of it is important, but sometimes just to bring in a specific speaker is good. We have a 6-week nutrition course. The Cornell Cooperative Extension comes in and offers some classes on nutrition. EPIC, Every Person Influences Children, we partner with, and they run a parenting class for about 10 weeks. And that's once a week for 10 weeks. Again, How to Be a Better Tenant, another class. Right on site at Carolyn's house, we have a high school equivalency program, and they can roll out of bed and roll right into the classroom. And we've had many successful graduations, and that's a biggie. I don't know about you, but I think the classroom is right outside my office. I hear the teacher often, and I think it's a lot easier getting your high school degree than it is to actually go through the high school equivalency program. It's a rigorous program, and many of our residents have mastered it. So we're pretty proud of them. We also have domestic violence counseling, both group and one-on-one, so we address those needs. Any mental health, any substance abuse recovery, and sometimes these are all co-current, and so any of those we bring in the experts, or we research and partner with those outside of Carolyn's house.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned specifically that you have a financial program where you teach them, like the ins and outs of money, how to pay rent and all that. Oftentimes, do they not know it?
Oh, without a doubt. And oftentimes, those residents at Carolyn's house are still on government support because they haven't been able to establish a career or a job to pay the bills. And their response when I first say, okay, we got to get you in to see Miss Maggie because we're going to set you up on a budget and teach you, in case you don't know, we're going to teach you how to prioritize and how to pay your bills. And they're going, well, wait a minute, I don't have any money. I go, oh, yeah, you do. I mean, the rent that is being paid here, although it is being paid by the taxpayer, at the same time, it is your grant. It is your grant, and it is your money. So let's figure out how to budget that accordingly.
So, what influence do you think plays on them like I'm trying to find the right way to word it, but when they don't know how to do these financials and then they find themselves in cases where they are being domestically abused or, in one way or another, what influence do you think it plays where they don't know how to handle their finances, that they become victimized?
Well, yeah, absolutely. It's just a continued control tactic to how do I word this? To maintain the control so that they stay in that situation. If more and more, and I'm going to use women, even though men are abused as well, but since Carolyn's House is women only, that's the gender I'm going to focus on. More and more women, if they are being controlled, no matter what they are being controlled by, if they know that a Carolyn's House, a YWCA of Niagara exists, that can break them through that which is holding them, and finances could be holding them, if they know that there is assistance out there that may lead them toward independence and self-sufficiency.
So a lot of them are, basically what you're saying is they're stuck in the situation where whoever's, violating them, they're stuck there because they feel like they can't go out and about and, get and hold a job and handle their finances. They're dependent on who's abusing them due to that.
Absolutely. I mean, if you're told over and over and over that you can't do it, pretty soon you may start to believe that. Mm-hmm. So we hope that by raising the profile of Carolyn's House and what the YWCA of Niagara has to offer, and I understand you're going to hear from some of my coworkers on other programs within the YWCA.
Right. I'll be hearing later today from Mary Brennan-Taylor. We'll be going more into detail about the YWCA with her.
Right, and then that's an awesome reference to be able to bring in Mary and to talk about the other programs that are out there.
Yeah.
So that's a good thing.
Yeah, she'll be in for our listeners. She will be in at 12:15. She is also involved with the YWCA. Is she also involved with Carolyn's House?
Well, we are. Carolyn's House is the YWCA. So yeah.
Okay.
She's a coworker. Well, the YWCA is the nonprofit, and Carolyn's House is a program of the YWCA. Mary will be coming in and talking about, in addition, she can obviously is well versed with Carolyn's House, but in addition to Carolyn's House, can talk about the other programs within the Y that it specifically addresses domestic violence. Okay.
So then what would you say is the ultimate goal of Carolyn's House? What is the driving force of it outside of, make these women and children become self-sufficient? Is there anything else that's in mind, or is that the driving force?
That is the driving force, because the residents that come into Carolyn's House have to have some level of self-sufficiency, because Carolyn's House is not, it's secured, but there isn't a curfew. We don't tell them what to do. They can choose their programs that best suit their need to self-sufficiency, and they chart their own course. They make their own path. There's a full-time social worker at Carolyn's House that works with every single resident on a weekly basis. How are you doing? What did you accomplish over the last week? What can we offer you that we may not have right now? And we'll start doing research on that. And as they chart their course and become more self-sufficient, the end game, the end goal is permanent housing, and then sustaining permanent housing. So if we have a resident that successfully graduates from Carolyn's House, we look for permanent housing with them and then keep track. And if they ever want to come back and attend any of our programs, or even just to meet with the counselors, they're more than welcome to do that.
Okay. And to kind of wrap it up, I don't think I actually touched upon it. Where exactly is Carolyn's House, and how do people get there?
Get there to begin with?
Yeah.
Carolyn's House is located at 542 6th Street in Niagara Falls, between Walnut and Ferry. It's an application process, and we do a couple of intake interviews. One is with myself, and we address their economic standing. How would they pay for their apartment, it is low-income housing, so they have to be able to afford the apartment, but yet they can't make more than a particular cap depending on their circumstances, depending on actually how many children they have and what apartment they're going for, since there are studio 1, 2, and 3 bedroom apartments. Mm-hmm. So we try to cover all kinds of bases. Once they fill out the application, then we address those financial parameters, and then they meet with our social worker and address, okay, what exactly do you need here at Carolyn's House that can catapult you into permanent housing?
Are there certain limitations if someone's applying and has children, with how many children they're allowed to bring in with them, and age limits on the children as well?
Yeah, that's a great question. For example, you wouldn't really want to put a mom with 5 children in a studio apartment.
Right.
So the apartments are spacious and they're lovely, and we match the real estate need to the family composition. As far as age limit goes, since it is a no male visitation site, a mom could not come into Carolyn's house with her adult son. She may have an adult son that's 21 and still dependent upon her, but unfortunately, this is not the place for an adult male.
Mm-hmm. So male children can go, but obviously once they hit 18, 21,
and
sorry.
And you know what? And that's rare. That hasn't really happened. It's primarily a mom with young children.
Right.
So it really isn't something that needs to be addressed that often.
I imagine that
if
much.
Ever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to touch upon while you're here?
You know what? I don't think so. We do have one program at Carolyn's house that has been modeled and repeated in Lockport, and that's our culinary arts training program, which is a training program for learning the culinary arts. And residents of Carolyn's house attend a 16-week program with a chef and trainer, and then that segues right into our social enterprise called the Catering Crew and a job situation. More often than not, sometimes a first job for women. So that works out very, very well because we're doing job training and development and then sustainment.
It sounds like, to me, it's one of the most important front runners of programs for victims, particularly female, of domestic violence. And it's kind of crazy that we're trying to raise awareness and stuff like this, but you never really hear about places like this because the issue is just swept so much under the rug and it wants to be ignored that you never hear or see advertisings for, here's somewhere you can go for it.
Yeah, absolutely, Evan.
And that's unfortunate.
It is unfortunate, which is why we are so appreciative for the invitation to be here today because, again, it raises that profile. One other aspect of Carolyn's house, which I'm very grateful for having, is that we have a counselor on staff whose sole focus is on the education and employment component. She meets with every single woman in Carolyn's house and addresses where they are in their educational process, where they are in their employment and career process, and really does work with them intimately versus saying, okay, just go get a job. No. What does your resume look like? Cover letter? What are you going to wear to an interview? How are you going to present yourself? And is this the right job for you? Yeah,
that's important skills that not even a high school or college would teach you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like you mentioned, one of the first things right off the bat is you mentioned how, you learn how to balance a checkbook. I'm 22 years old. I'm going to be graduating college, and I'm not even sure how to do that at this point.
There you go.
No one ever taught me.
I just taught a 32-year-old woman at Carolyn's house last week how to write a check. She had never done it before. But you know what? Frankly, in this technology age, we don't write a whole lot of checks these days. So
it's as easy as a swipe of a card.
Yeah, unfortunately. But we have to make sure that we swipe that card responsibly.
And you mentioned how you were appreciative of, us contacting you. We are very appreciative that you even came.
Oh, well, thank you very much.
So, anything else?
Nope, I can't think of anything.
All right, thank you very much. This was Jay. Sorry, I'm blanking out.
Susan Ben.
Jay Susan Ben.
Thanks,
Apologies,
Evan.
Everyone. She was so great, and here I am blanking out. I've been up a while, people. Coming up at the top of the next hour, we will have the Buffalo State University Police Department joining us. And then the hour after that, Senator Gallivan will be calling in here on 91.3 FM WBNY. Interview number 2, top of the hour, 11 o'clock. I'm joined here by Peter Carey, Chief of University Police. Peter, how are you?
Good. How are you this morning?
I'm good. So can you describe to me your day-to-day activities as the Chief of Police here?
I'm the Chief of University Police here at SUNY Buffalo State, operating the police department for 24/7 police patrols and services and emergency response, and making sure that we make Buffalo State a safe place for our community.
Very good, and we appreciate it. So, going off of the theme of this week for the Week of the Warriors, how do you, as the Chief of Police here, define domestic violence at Buffalo State?
It's defined two ways, in that there is a New York State law definition which defines domestic violence as any disturbance, dispute, violence, or report of an offense between individuals within a domestic relationship where police intervention is requested. A domestic incident is not necessarily a violation of the law, and there are specific offenses under the New York State Criminal Procedure Law related to domestic violence. But as an educational institution, we're also governed by federal legislation, mainly the Clery Act, and that we report our Clery Act crimes that occur on campus within a calendar year in our annual security report. And they further break down domestic violence into a further category more in line with our population, and they call that dating violence.
So in the campus area, there is a difference between domestic and dating violence. Could you explain to me the difference?
I read the definition of domestic violence, but under the Clery Act, the term dating violence means violence committed by a person who is or has been in a social relationship of a romantic or intimate nature with the victim, and where the existence of such relationship shall be determined based upon a consideration of the following factors: the length of the relationship, the type of the relationship, and the frequency of interaction between the persons involved in the relationship. Basically, it involves people who are not living together, who do not have a child in common, and other more traditional family relationships that would be covered under the domestic violence definition.
So then the dating violence is definitely something more frequent that would happen on a college campus anywhere as opposed to a domestic violence.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so then what are some of the ways that the police department can help with this issue, whether it be dating violence or domestic violence? I suppose we'll focus on dating violence specifically.
Well, we have our officers are specifically trained in response to domestic violence, and we have strong partnerships both within the campus community and off campus. Our counseling center offers counseling services to our students who may be a victim, either on or off campus. Erie County Crisis Services offers counseling and support services and advocacy to domestic violence victims. We also have our college judicial process. Our Dean of Students can assist students who are victims of domestic violence with their academic needs. And we have a lot of other resources here on campus that can assist a victim. Off campus, additionally, we have the Family Justice Center, which is kind of a one-stop shopping for victims of domestic violence or sexual assault.
Okay, so then focusing on sexual assault then, what is RAD? That is an acronym for people who do not know. RAD.
It's the Rape Aggression Defense System. It's a self-defense type program that is a national program on many college campuses put out by a company, and it specifically involves both classroom and hands-on self-defense tactics within the Rape Aggression Defense program. We have university police officers who have been trained and are certified as instructors in the RAD program. It's about a 12-hour program, both hands-on and classroom instruction, that teaches both either men or women some basic self-defense tactics that they can use should they become involved in an attack. But more importantly, as part of our orientation and other educational programs, we provide personal safety measures that our students, faculty, and staff can exercise that we hope will take away that opportunity for them to be a victim of either domestic violence or sexual assault.
So how would a person find RAD? How could they sign up for it, be a part of it, learn about it?
There's a couple of ways. On our website, we have information about RAD, and we have a form on there that the person can download and submit to our office. Either individually to be included in a class with others, and we also take requests from different departments, student organizations that want to have a class specific for the members of their organization. Again, they can fill out that form, or they can email us through the police at buffalostate.edu, and our lieutenant will make the arrangements to work with the schedule of the members of that organization and our officers to get that class taken care of.
Sounds like it's very there's no reason you shouldn't be able to do it if they're willing to work around your schedule. They seem very willing to work with you.
But we'll basically, barring unusual circumstances, we'll work around the schedule of the group to get that class done. It's free of charge, and we have all the equipment and facilities to do it, and it's a great program, both physically and emotionally, to empower people to defend themselves should they find themselves in that circumstance.
You said it's free of charge. Is that for we are on a Buffalo State campus? If people might listen to this radio station that might not necessarily go here, is it free for people who aren't students, or is it only free to students?
It's free to everybody. For someone who would be a non-student, we would try to work them into one of our existing classes that has basically an open enrollment. Or if there's an organization that we're doing a specific class for and there's room in that class, we would try to fit that person into that class as well.
Okay, that seems like a very good program then.
It's very well received. Our officers are very enthusiastic about it. It's a very positive program, both mentally and physically, and again, trying to empower the victims to protect themselves.
Yeah. So then if a student were facing domestic violence or sexual assault, dating violence, what would you tell them they should do, like step-by-step process after the incident?
First is to call the university police. regardless of whether the person wants to refer a student offender to the college judicial system or an arrest. We would take a report and, most importantly, provide that victim with assistance. If there's any injuries, if there's any destruction of property, their safety in their residence hall, or safety for a commuter student going to or from classes, escorts, provide them, offer the services of the counseling center, crisis services, family justice center. There are certain circumstances under New York state law to where a police officer, any police officer, if there's evidence of a physical injury and an aggressor can be determined, that regardless of whether the victim wants to prosecute, the police officers are required under the law to make that arrest.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned before escorts, and we have things on campus such as the escort vans. Mm-hmm. How would a student, because I'm assuming most of these cases happen at night in the dark, how would you get an escort or find the escort van?
The escort vans operate like a bus, stopping at all the blue light emergency phones around campus. Our student assistants, University Police student assistants, also offer walking escorts, where if you call 878-6333, and particularly in response to a domestic incident, we'll be aware of the victim and the services we're providing. And a student assistant, a UPSA, will walk them from any one point on campus to any other point. And if there's no one else available, UPSA, University Police officer, will provide that service as well.
Okay. And you mentioned before that when the victim comes forth to the police, they will help them in whatever way they can. What are some of the things that the police department can do for the victims in these cases, whether it be dating violence or sexual assault?
Our first most important thing is to assist the victim. Are there any physical injuries that need to be taken care of either at a local hospital or through the Weigel Health Center? We'll offer them the counseling services of our counseling center as well as crisis services, the assistance of our department in any student judicial or prosecution, the Family Justice Center, which is a one-stop shopping for domestic violence and sexual assault cases in the city of Buffalo. And we will work with our Dean of Students. Should the student need any academic considerations, the Dean of Students can help with that. Our residence life staff can help with any room assignments or room changes for the victim of domestic violence or sexual assault. If it's a sexual assault, our Title IX officer and the Equity and Campus Diversity Office, Dr. Jones, can assist with any assistance that related to Title IX as well.
Okay. Anything else you wanted to add related to the topic?
Participate in our RAD Defense program.
Mm-hmm. That seems like a great program.
It's very good. We're very proud of it and offering it. Listen to or ask for our personal safety tips that can help eliminate the opportunity for someone to be a victim of domestic violence or sexual assault. And know that the University Police and Buffalo State College are very concerned with it, and we have a lot of services and resources, and our goal is to prevent it, but if it takes place, to assist the victim in every way that we can so they can continue their lives and their academic pursuits here at Buffalo State College in a safe environment.
Okay, so again, that phone number, if you want a personal escort, 24/7, 878-6333.
That's it.
Okay. Peter Carey, everyone. Chief Officer of the Buffalo State College Police Department. Thank you very much for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you for the opportunity to be here today.
Well, I'm yawning a bit. But hey, I've been doing this for 14 hours? Question mark? Yeah, I just got the nod. Yeah. Yeah, well, in case you weren't there for hour one, I yawned like 5 minutes in, so I knew I was kind of in trouble. That was a very bad situation. Coming up in the next 10-15 minutes, we'll be receiving a phone call from Mary Brennan-Taylor to continue our Week of Warriors theme of domestic violence awareness, knowledge, education, all that good stuff. Until then, we're going to keep you busy with some cool sounds, some beats, some noises, some melodies, and some other stuff. Kayla's here also. She'll be going on in 10 hours. She's in the other room watching Nightmare Before Christmas. Apparently, she did not want to watch Groundhog Day. Very disappointing. It's the best movie ever. If you disagree with me, well, no one cares. Nobody asked you. I think. I'm a little jumbled up right now, guys. I'm going to stop. Well, I am now joined by Mary Brennan-Taylor of the YWCA. Mary, are you still there?
I'm here, Evan.
Hey, how you doing today, Mary?
I'm well, thank you.
All right. So we'll just get going. Mary Brennan-Taylor, can you tell me a little bit about yourself, introduce yourself, and what do you do?
Sure. Again, my name is Mary. I am from the YWCA of Niagara and the Tonawondas, and I'm the Vice President of Programs for this agency, responsible for the Alternatives to Domestic Violence program, which would include counseling, individual and group, as well as some life-saving services such as our 9-bed safe dwelling, hotline, and transitional housing.
Okay.
And in addition, also, I'm responsible for the Rape and Sexual Assault Services program for victims in Niagara County.
Okay, excellent. And going on our theme of the Week of Warriors, we are raising awareness for sexual assault, domestic violence, all that. How would you personally define domestic violence?
Well, I mean, it obviously is all about power and control, Evan. It could be financial control. It can be emotional abuse. It can be certainly sexual abuse, physical abuse. But one need not be physically battered to be a victim of domestic violence. It is again about the power and control that an abuser exerts over his or her victim.
Mm-hmm. So we were talking this morning. I spoke with J. Susan Ben, who was from Carolyn's house. She says she worked, very closely with you, and we discussed a lot of in depth about. We kind of focused on like the financial power, how it can influence. Would you like to elaborate on kind of like the social power and like kind of like images that need to be upheld and how this can influence domestic violence?
Well, certainly, in terms of, since you discussed financial control with Jay, the financial control, though, is one of the areas that keeps women locked in often to these domestic violence situations, because if they cannot provide safe housing for themselves or for their children, and they rely upon the abuser for that, it's very difficult, very, very difficult. And oftentimes you will certainly hear people say, "Why doesn't she just leave?" Well, it's not as simple as that, and that really gets into some victim blaming when that kind of question is raised. Honestly, a victim generally, and it may be hard for you and I to understand, but they love this individual. They don't love the abuse. They want the abuse to stop, but they do care for the for the abuser. If there are children in common, that is another thing that keeps women kind of locked in frequently to a domestic violence situation. There can be intimidation. There can be something as simple as a look that somebody is given that can just strike fear into the heart of a victim, and he need not raise a hand. There certainly is the isolation. I don't know if you and Jay touched upon that at all, but isolation is certainly a strategy that is employed very, very successfully. And by isolation, I mean getting a victim to drop close, supportive relationships that she has with people who care about her. Could be her family, could be her friends. It can even be children. So those are the various types of strategies that we see with our domestic violence victims.
Mm-hmm. And I spoke last with the Buffalo State Police Department with Peter Carey, and we kind of touched upon how there are sometimes it's rare, but sometimes there are male victims. Would you say that the same strategies could be applied to that in the same way with isolation and even sometimes financial?
Oh, yes, of course. It depending on each individual unique circumstance, but certainly isolation, certainly emotional abuse. I mean, if someone is told over, and this could be whether it's a woman as the abuser against a man, or two women or two men, whenever power and control is used, that obviously is a very toxic relationship. And for a woman to emotionally abuse a man, if you're told over and over and over again by someone who you care about that you're worthless, that no one else would ever want you, you're lucky to have me, sometimes, you start to believe it.
Yeah. And you touched upon something very interesting to me that you said Sorry, I'm just drawing a blank real quick. You said that the victims will honestly care about the abuser, and people will say, "Oh, why don't they just leave?" Well, they love the person, not the abuser.
Correct.
If somebody was, somebody came to you and said, this, has just started. Excuse me. It's nothing serious right now, but they have hit me, and I do love this person, and I want it to stop. If it's still in the early stages, where would you guide that victim to? How would you, guide them? What advice would you give them?
We would certainly work with a victim and go through, I don't know if you've ever seen a power and control wheel that goes through in kind of pie-shaped sections that will illustrate for a victim the things that we've talked about in terms of using coercion and threats, or using intimidation, or using emotional abuse or economic abuse or male privilege or children, or minimizing and blaming, and say, do you see yourself in any of this? Do you see anything with this, this power and control wheel where you fit in? And if so, here are some things that you really need to think about, because in a domestic violence situation, it really is only going to escalate.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And chances are, Evan, if someone comes to us, they already know. If they pick up the phone and they call that hotline number and say, "Gee, I'm not sure, but I just wanted to talk with someone," there's some little voice inside that's saying this isn't right.
It's kind of along the same lines of, they tell the kids, if you have a uniform for school, or, you have guidelines, if you're curious as to whether or not it fits the guidelines, chances are it does / you're in the wrong if you have to think about it.
Correct. And yes, that's exactly right. And in terms of children who are abused, children who are abused, we see often as well. They love the parent, they just don't love the abuse.
Right. Yeah, and that's just it's so unfortunate that, like you mentioned, that's
Mm-hmm.
such a big key to it is, you like the person, just not that characteristic of them.
But what we also try to tell our clients is, you cannot control the behavior of your abuser. Only he or she, depending on the victim, only he or she can control their own behavior, but you can control the situations that you put yourself in. You can control, what you are doing, and that's what we try to work with them on.
Yeah, and that seems like a very good philosophy, all across all levels of anything, even beyond domestic abuse. That's a very a wide way. So kind of moving into a different area, still related though. We mentioned earlier how you're associated with the YWCA and Carolyn's House with J. Susan Ben. Can you tell me what you do for the YWCA and what the YWCA's mission is?
Sure. The mission of the YWCA is the elimination of racism and the empowerment of women. And everything that we do, Evan, has to fit within that mission. Any program that we consider running has to be viewed through that lens, or we don't do it. So the programs for safe housing, for safety planning, for counseling, for court advocacy for domestic violence victims certainly fits within that, as does the programs, the Kids Strong programs that we run for children who have witnessed domestic violence in their lives. The rape and sexual assault program that we took over from Niagara County Department of Mental Health about going on 6 years now also fits within that, so that we provide 24/7 response for anyone who has experienced sexual assault. So if we get a call on our hotline from one of the hospitals in Niagara County indicating that they have an 18-year-old victim in the emergency room in need of an advocate, we will dispatch a rape crisis advocate to any of the hospitals in Niagara County, whether it's Lockport or Newfane, Lewiston, North Tonawanda, or Niagara Falls. And the Carolyn's House program is one of our premier programs for the YWCA, and it is, as Jay mentioned, I'm sure, a homeless housing program for women and children, who many of whom are fleeing domestic violence situations. But domestic violence is not the prerequisite for residency at Carolyn's House. Homelessness would be.
Yeah, we did discuss that earlier in great detail, and it was very helpful. So going into, you mentioned there that you've taken on the Niagara County's YWCA. Can you tell us about the merge between the Niagara County and Erie County YWCA?
Well, the merger is between the YWCA of Niagara, and the YWCA of Niagara is our flagship office is in Lockport, and then we have the Carolyn's House program in Niagara Falls, and then there is the YWCA of the Tonawandas, which is housed at 49 Tremont in North Tonawanda. And they also provide services to women and children in Erie County as well, primarily in the Tonawandas area. And that program in Tonawanda and our YWCA of Niagara again we're almost at the completion stage of the merger, which will really, I think, expand the services especially for domestic violence victims and their children. The YWCA of the Tonawandas does a tremendous job with supervised visitation for non-custodial parents and children to be able to have a safe and secure visit with the non-custodial parent under supervision, and that's held in our office at 49 Tremont. There's also an offenders accountability program. It's a 26-week program, usually court-mandated, for men who have had domestic violence charges, and this is to work with them to hold them accountable, but also to help them with dealing with healthier relationships.
So, first and foremost, before we move on, I just want to ask, what was the reason for the merger, and if the name will change, what will the new name of the new YWCA be called?
Well, the new name will be the YWCA of the Niagara Frontier. So that will be the new name of both entities as they merge. And, excuse me, since the YWCA of the Tonawandas is also driven to meet the challenges of the mission, as is the YWCA of Niagara, we really felt that it would be best for us to have, economies of scale, to be able to pool our resources to be an even stronger entity. So that's why the merger.
Okay, so then what exactly, you kind of touched upon it earlier, what can we expect from the new YWCA of the Niagara Frontier?
Well, I think, you will see stronger programs. You will see maybe some expansion of programs, things that work well in the Tonawandas. For example, the Kids Strong program that I referenced is something that they've been running for quite some time for children, and now we have just expanded it as of last week, as a matter of fact, to children in the eastern end of the county. And we will be doing similar kinds of programs, expanding the counseling focus, which we have always had at the YWCA of Niagara, and now expanding the number of counselors that will be available at the YWCA of the Tonawandas. So it's just a strengthening of our programs.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned that there's programs available for these children. Can you describe how these children or families can find these programs, how they can sign up for them, and what they can expect from them?
Sure. They can certainly, if they're in the Lockport area, they can call 433-6714, and they could ask for me. My name is Mary Brennan-Taylor, and I can put them in touch with the particular program directors. If it's a Kids Strong program, if they're interested in supervised visitation, if people are interested in the offender accountability program, just give a holler, and I can put you in touch with the appropriate individuals.
Okay. And so going on about the Week of Warriors here at the station, how did you hear about the event, and what made you want to participate in it?
Well, I received a call actually from Jessica Kasich, who, my hat's off to her and to your program for providing this kind of awareness and giving us an opportunity to let your listeners know what the resources are in the community. Thank you so much for doing that.
Oh, thank you for giving us a call.
Okay.
So, anything else that you wanted to add along with the theme of domestic violence, the YWCA, the new YWCA, any of the programs?
I guess just, if your listeners are aware of anyone in their immediate family or their social circle who may be in need of services, please give them our phone number, again, 433-6714. Our services are free, our services are confidential, and we are available 24/7 to help.
Okay.
Thanks, Evan.
Thank you very much,
Take
Mary.
care. Bye-bye.
Yep. You heard it from Mary Brennan-Taylor, everyone, of the new YWCA of the Niagara Frontier. If you know anyone who is a victim, or if you are a victim yourself, give them a call at 433-6714. We're nearing our number 15, question mark? Yeah, I think. I don't know. It doesn't matter. We're live on a 24-hour edition of the Enigma Hours here. Soon we got more interviews coming up, all by phone, so stay tuned, because I don't have to go anywhere, which, if I don't have to go anywhere, that means neither do you, because I'm a busy guy. I got plans. You're my faithful listeners. Your plans coincide with my show, right? It is right now. Stay tuned. I'm really looking forward to all these interviews, really. I'm learning a lot. You're learning a lot. Fingers crossed, everyone. 91.3 FM. WBNY. It's getting to that point, guys, where my brain's just like, you need bed. I'm not really leaving the seat anymore as much as I should. I'm kind of shutting down, because although I've only been on the air for 16 hours, I've been awake for 26 hours now. Now, some of you might think, oh, I do that all the time. It can't be that hard. Why is he being such a little baby back? Fill in the words. Well, the truth is because I don't really do this that often. I like my beauty sleep. And trust me, there aren't enough hours in the day for my ugly ass. In fact, I'd like to dedicate that last one to my dear friend Nicholas Lippa, listening in all the way in Rochester, and he is a DJ here as well, and he is participating in the Week of Warriors. He'll be here Saturday and Sunday. What? 48 hours. Round of applause. Nick Lippa and what he's about to do. You can't see it, but I'm swinging my hands in a circle around the mic. It's more like a half pipe. All right, we are back on air. We are with QueenAfi Gaston. Are you still there?
Yes, I am.
All right. Well, we'll just have at it. Can you introduce yourself, and what do you do?
Okay, I am QueenAfi, the founder of Domestic Balance Wears Mini Tags Organization, and what we do is advocate for women, men, and teens that are victims as well as abusers of domestic violence, and we also educate about the many tags that domestic violence wears, which is verbal, physical, emotional, sexual, and financial abuse.
Mm-hmm. And we've been doing an event all week long, well, starting yesterday, but it is going to be all week long, and we've talked to many other people, and we've kind of established here the financial side of it and the social side of it. Is there a specific aspect that domestic violence wears many tags that you focus on?
Well, we are focused on all of those tags. But one of the number one tags that we identify with being the cause of domestic violence relationships is verbal abuse.
Mm-hmm. And so you kind of focus on how everything stems off of verbal abuse?
Yeah. We kind of focus off how everything pretty much stems from verbal abuse. And there's quite a few research out there that supports that, but of course, verbal abuse is still one that is not spoken about enough, is not taken seriously enough, but it does in fact lead to physical and or emotional abuse, even sexual, even emotional. It leads to all of those other tags from what we have found in the education that we bring.
Mm-hmm. We were talking earlier today with a few members of a local group called the YWCA, and it's kind of their main focus is that domestic violence stems from a kind of a desire to control. Would you agree with that?
Sure. That's part of being an abuser. So yeah.
Okay.
That's one of the warning signs of an abusive personality. Of course, it's way more vast than just verbal.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just controlling. You know, there's several warning signs that people need to be focused on when we're talking about the abuser. And of course, controlling is one, but there's also isolation. There's also jealousy. There's also threatening balance. There's also unrealistic expectations that the abuser put on you. So it's more vast than just controlling, but controlling is one.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so from then your perspective, going from all those traits, how would you define domestic violence?
Again, I would say that domestic is the family. Domestic should be the household should be a place where, we go and we experience love, we experience happiness, we experience genuineness. And then you have balance, which is way at the back of the dictionary. I have failed yet to realize why does violence seem to seep into our household? How does it get into our household? And, learning and studying domestic violence, it comes from people. It comes from tradition. It comes from behavior. We learn different behaviors that leads to controlling, manipulation, jealousy, isolation, threatening balance, unrealistic expectations, and not to mention quick involvement.
Right, so quick involvement, you mean quick reactions, not thinking through?
Quick involvement means that we get in relationships with people that we just don't know.
Oh, okay. So
we
it's
get involved too quickly, and that is a warning sign for an abuser. If an abuser knows that they can persuade you quickly, easily, fast, it's nothing for them to control you, manipulate you, isolate you, put unrealistic expectations on you. It's nothing for those things to follow, especially when we get involved quickly.
So it kind of stems from that unrealistic, I just met you, but I'm already in love with you. And that person on the other end, that's going to turn up into the abuser saying, if I can get them to, quote unquote, love me this quick, I'm wondering what else I can make them do, what else I can get away with.
Absolutely. And that's one of the prime things that as an abuser, we feed off from. I am first a victim, and then I became an abuser. So I identify with both aspects of it. I can speak to both, to the victim behavior, to the abuser's behavior. And one of the prime examples for the abusers is that we persuade our victims to get involved quickly with us. If we can do that, there's nothing else that we can't do.
So then what would you say, have you ever experienced domestic violence in your lifetime, either witnessed it or been a part of it?
Yes, I've been a victim first. I was a victim of domestic violence first. And I was the person who was getting manipulated, controlled, physically beat, things of that sort. And then as time went on and a tragedy happened to my best friend, she was shot 5 times by her baby father. Once that happened to her, I built up a wall and said, never again. So I then became the abuser.
Mm-hmm. So from there, how did you get from that point to founding Domestic Violence Wears Many Tags?
A lot of what you want to say, self something.
Self-search?
A lot of self-search. Mm-hmm. A lot of searching and soul searching and putting together the tragedies that I faced and then the trauma that I've given to people, to men in relationships. Then it started to spill into my children's life. So I had to take a real big halt and step back and understand what was happening to me. So, I decided to, of course, get educated, enroll in school, and put some pieces together for my own life. And then I discovered through that, wow, pretty much all of these tags I identify with. And then working through that, I'm noticing that men and women and teens don't identify with the vastness of domestic violence. Yeah, we identify with physical because, yeah, somebody can be charged for that. You know, you can't assault anyone in America. So that's one of the number one tags that we identify with. But we don't identify with verbal, emotional. We don't understand that as a victim, it's harder for us as victims to try to get away from or heal from the verbal, heal from the emotion. That's the hardest part of trying to get out of a domestic violence relationship. You know, so I had to discover all of that through my transformation. I decided, you know what, we need to get educated on these tags and the severity of each and every one of these tags. And that's how Domestic Violence Wears Many Tags organization came into play 6 years ago.
Okay. Well, I agree with you on many of the points you made. The first point I wanted to touch up upon was, how you said education, and that when the more you're educated and the more you know about this, the more you are able to self-identify. Do you think people who are in situations who are the victims, that they're more than likely not educated about the system, or do you think it's more of the perpetrator, that they're not educated?
I don't think either is educated. I mean, if we look back over it, there's many cases and again, much research to support that in cases of domestic violence, a lot of us start out as victims first. We learn behavior. Mm-hmm. And there are some of us that, take on more victim type of behavior, which is the not aggressive type of behavior, but we're passive. We're pretty much passive. We'll go along, to feel that love, or the normal. It could be the normal for the victim. They're used to seeing, domestic violence taking place in their life, so they're accustomed to that type of relationship. And then with the abuser, we take on more aggressive behavior. We're kind of outspoken. Then there's some of us who are abusers where we're not outspoken, but yet we're still controlling. So I find that we're just not educated on these tags, as well as we're not educated on victim behavior and abusers' behavior. And I find that in working with both women, men, and teens that are victims and abusers, that they're not educated on it and the severity of it.
Yeah, when we were talking to a few other local foundations on it, they said one of the houses that, takes in homeless women who are victims of this, that one of the first things they do is give them an education to help them kind of get back up on their feet, and so that this doesn't happen again. And one of the things that you said that, really struck me was how the physical domestic violence, that's what's, taken seriously. That's, you can't go around hitting someone. But for whatever reason, the verbal abuse aspect of it is much more hush-hush, pushed under the carpet. Why do you think that, in our country, that the verbal end of it isn't nearly as taken seriously?
I think because, America, we say freedom of speech, and that's actually taken out of context. So we use an aggressive tone, not to mention behavior patterns, things that we learn in our household. How do we communicate there? Are we communicating aggressive? Are we communicating with profanity? Are we communicating with our hands? Because in some sort, that could be considered aggressive. So what are we learning as little children? Because research says that we ought to be teaching our youngsters effective communication at crib age. But in fact, what are we teaching our youngsters? And in a lot of cases that I find, we're teaching verbal abuse. Verbal abuse is seeming to be an effective sort of communication. Not to mention, as we get older, then America says, hey, it's freedom of speech. Sticks and stones will break your bones, but words will never hurt you. Which, that is extremely bogus.
Right.
And it's not real.
Yeah.
And we got to stop teaching our little people that rhyme, that nursery rhyme, because, children are dying left and right because of bullying. We got people right now that are in bullying situations and they're committing suicide. So that rhyme in itself is inappropriate. And then America backs it up with freedom of speech.
Right, I totally agree with you on that too. So then moving forward, can you tell us more about the Domestic Violence Wears Many Tags program, such as what you do for the victims, how can they contact you, what you can do for them?
Absolutely. Victims and abusers can contact me. There's a lot of things that we do anonymous because people want help, but they are still embarrassed. They are still humiliated. And if you really look at it, you're not going to have pastors, you're not going to have police, judges, whatever, come out and really get help unless the law is involved. But we've lined it up where people can call into our anonymous calls and receive help from us about these many tags, and just getting educated on what domestic violence really is and how much we need to take this piece here very seriously. And of course, people can friend request me on Facebook as QueenAfi, all one word, QueenAfi. Friend request me there. Become my friend and get more of this information. This is the best way to tune in with us and, see what we have coming up. We do something every month. Every month we do something in terms of educating the community on domestic violence and the many tags that it wears.
Mm-hmm. So, just kind of going off that, are you based out of your hometown, or is this something where anyone can contact you? And the things you do, like you said, you do something every month. Is that something everyone can have access to, or is
everyone can have access to it? It's just a phone call away. We can do conference calls now. We do a lot of internet-based stuff where people can join in the chats and talk with us and really get more educated on this issue, and as well as remain anonymous. But at the same time, victims and abusers are getting the help that they need. They're asking their questions, and they don't have to, come out and maybe feel embarrassed or ridiculed about domestic violence because it really is still taboo. But domestic violence with many tags is trying to make this a popular conversation amongst women, men, and teens. So that's that whole family piece there where women, men, and teens can chime in with us on our monthly calls that we do.
Yeah, that's one of the themes that we're trying to do here at 91.3 FM this week is kind of the Week of Warriors, is that these people who are victims are warriors once they come forward, and that it isn't an easy thing to do to come forward because a lot of the times we discussed earlier, they love the person, they just don't love what they're doing to them, and that's why they have such a hard time doing something about it.
Absolutely. And then as an abuser, me speaking from the abuser side, it can just be dangerous, to just leave a relationship like that. I don't recommend that victims just jump up and leave and tell the abuser that they're leaving. It can be very dangerous doing that. Research says that their chances of dying goes up 75%.
Right.
So that's where we have the anonymous things where victims can tune in, and build up the courage to walk away. That way, at that point, they're like, forget it. I'll do whatever it takes. I don't care. I'm getting out of here. This abuser will not know that I'm leaving. So building up the courage to get victims to be able to walk away safely. There's a lot of victims that go to the abuser and say, I'm leaving you, and that's a no-no. You don't do that because as an abuser myself, we will put the GPS on your car. We will track your phone. We will go to high limits because you have threatened to leave.
Mm-hmm.
So it can be very dangerous to do that.
So the difference there is when you build up the courage to leave.
Absolutely.
The key thing is you have to build up the courage. You can't just say to them, hey, by the way, I'm leaving tonight, because A, that gives them a timetable, B, that lets their feelings simmer. The key to it is once you build up the courage, anonymously leave. Do not let them know. Get out of there as best you can if you are truly choosing to leave the person.
That's right. Once you have gotten the education, once you have tapped in and really learned about the tags and really learned about victim behavior and abusers' behavior, who better to learn that from than a woman that was a victim as well as an abuser?
Yeah.
Who better to
because you know both ends of it.
Yeah, because you have both ends of it, right? And then you have victims that are identifying with victim behavior, and they're identifying with abusive behavior. And then their next question to me is, Queen, so what do I need to do in order to get out of the relationship? And that's where victims build up that courage and, plan their way out of that relationship to where it's like, I don't even care anymore. I'm leaving. And then we have cases where victims don't return. They never return to abusive relationships.
And that's, like you said, it's a process of educating yourself and knowing
Yep.
what to do.
Yep.
So-
And as a victim, I educate very well on that, because it is hard for the average victim to say, I'm leaving. And normally when they leave, of course, they come back. And it could be years and years and years before they leave the relationship again. So it's definitely about educating them and building up their courage to finally say, this is it for me. I don't care. Whatever I have to do, I'm doing it so I can leave this relationship without my abuser having no clue.
Right. Kind of get rid of the baggage as they leave.
Yeah.
So what do you hope to accomplish with Domestic Violence Wears Many Tags? What's the ultimate goal in mind?
The ultimate goal in mind is to certainly have people saying, you know what, domestic violence wears many tags. And having people really identify with these tags and the seriousness of each one of these tags. And, at the end of the day, saying exactly what I just said. Victims build up the courage to walk away. Abusers are reaching out and getting educated and changing their behaviors to see that I really am destroying this person's life, my children's life. Understanding, identifying where these behaviors come from. So having people just say at the end of the day, you know what? I beg to differ. Domestic violence wears many tags.
Yeah, it's not just one, you're using. It's not one tag.
It's not just physical. It's physical because, again, America identifies with it. You can't go around putting your hands on anyone.
Yeah,
That's the one you
exactly.
can call the police for and get prosecution. That's the one you can get time for. But what about the emotional abuse and the verbal abuse that we as victims, it's hard for us to get out of that and try to get mental help to come out of that. It's hard for us to do that.
Yeah.
That behavior seems to stick with us the longest as victims.
Yeah, one of the common themes that kind of keeps coming up, and I, can sense it coming up here, is, once you tell someone over and over and over the same lie constantly every single day, eventually they come to believe it.
Yeah. The victim starts to say, well, am I this way? The victim begins to believe that they are that way. So now it's not just verbal anymore. Now it's emotional. Now it's setting inside your bones. It's messing with your heart. It's messing with your happiness. Now it's emotional. Now I do feel like I'm backed up in a corner and I really don't know what to believe about myself anymore. The victim actually experiences that.
And that's kind of where the education comes in to play.
And
where
that's where the education comes in at.
You teach them that, you're not like this, and here's every single reason why.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And getting victims to ask me those hard questions, because victims get an opportunity with me to ask me as an abuser, well, Queen, why did he or she do this? Why did he or she call me dumb and stupid? And I get an opportunity to identify with them that this is the behavior of an abusive person, and going through what the strategies of an abuser is. And victims, I'm telling you, victims come out. I have calmed so many spirits, just by being able to say, here's the abusive behavior that you are experiencing. And I can identify with it because I was that way. One thing that I want America to know is that the behavior never changes. The behavior of an abuser never changes. The behavior of a victim never changes. It's the person, it's the people that change in this cycle. So if we can get people to identify with these behaviors, and put them as red flags, people can identify, oh, well, that's isolation, and point it out right away. The brain will ultimately go into, that's not something I want to get into. I've been educated about this. I've actually talked to an abuser about this. I've actually talked to a victim about this. So the brain, goes into that mode. And ultimately, we can save people from getting into domestic violence relationships.
Mm-hmm. So then what does the future of Domestic Violence Wears Many Tags look like? Right now we discussed, it's people coming to you anonymously and educating them. What are your goals for the future, and what are your kind of aspirations personally for you as a person?
Yeah, hopefully, this word can be spread around, international and, of course, national. We're talking on great levels, but getting people to really identify and tap into domestic violence with many tags as an educational resource for the community, national and international. And having us come out and, do the workshops, do the role play, do whatever it is we have to do as mental health leaders to get people to identify. It's not just a case where he or she needs to take their medication and numb what's happening to them. We're saying, no, don't do that. We're saying, let us come out and educate you and get you to identify with the many tags that domestic violence wear and how big this piece really is. So, hoping to be an educational resource from an international standpoint as well as a national standpoint.
So, is there anything else you wanted to add as in relation to domestic violence wears many tags or domestic violence in general?
No, I just want people to friend request me and get on board with this great information that I put out today. You can friend request me again at QueenAfi, all one word, on Facebook. And, of course, if you want to reach out by phone or by text, you can certainly do that at 202-821-8933. Our biggest goal is to lay new, improved information about domestic violence. There's a lot of old research, old teaching going around about domestic violence, but we're trying to lay a platform for some new, improved teaching as it pertains to domestic violence. And we're doing that through advocating for the many tags of domestic violence.
Well, personally, I think it is a beautiful, wonderful thing you are doing. So I just wanted to thank you from a person who knows someone who has been a victim before that, I think it's absolutely a wonderful thing that, the biggest thing out there and that people are realizing it is education. So I just wanted to thank you for that. And thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you.
Yep. Have a good day now.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye. All right, people, you heard it here on 91.3 FM WBNY. If you or someone you know is struggling with domestic violence, physical abuse, mental abuse, anything like that, another way you can reach out is to QueenAfi on Facebook, QueenAfi, all one word. And you can sign up for her program. It's absolutely free online. You learn all about it. And there's just another opinion on, the Week of the Warriors. That's, if you pay attention closely, everything just kind of seems to line up. The biggest keys are educating yourself and building up the courage. This all can't be in one night. Nothing good ever came in one night. Well, I could beg to differ that, but that's just a mean, crude joke, if you know what I mean. Week of the Warriors, raising awareness for domestic violence, domestic abuse, etc., etc., all falls under the same umbrella of horrible, horrible, unfortunate things. But it happens, and people need to know about it. And that's why we're here on WBNY. Joining me here on BNY is Julia Chesky. Julia, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Hi, Julia. How are you doing today?
I'm doing really good. How about yourself?
I'm doing good. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself? I know you're an author.
I am, yes, and a stay-at-home mom. I have 3 kids, and that's pretty much what I do.
Mm-hmm. So starting right off the bat, how would you define domestic violence?
I would define domestic violence by being anything from emotional abuse to mental, verbal, or physical abuse. If somebody's just down-talking you in your relationship, or even if they go further where they're hitting you or dragging you around, definitely that would be domestic abuse, even with emotional and having neglect, treating your feelings as if you don't matter,
Mm-hmm. We were talking earlier with someone else who basically said that domestic abuse comes from, or domestic violence comes from, a willingness to control. Would you agree with that? And if so, or if not, why?
I would completely agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
They feel like they have to control you in every way. It's even if you have an opinion about something, you really can't speak it because there will be consequences, So it takes over your whole being, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it it makes sense to me. So then, going off of the fact that you're an author, can you tell us, first of all, the name of the book, what it's about, and where the inspiration came for it?
Okay. My book is called, it's a very unique title, not really, just kidding there. It's Julia's Story, a Memoir. And it's only available on Amazon Kindle. So I don't have any copies that you could buy at a bookstore. But it was about my abusive relationship that I was in for 10 years. And I got with the guy when I was 17. And in later years, we ended up getting married. And we had 3 kids together. But our entire relationship was, I was being abused. If it wasn't physical abuse, then it was, emotional abuse and whatnot. But I just started writing one day. I've been away for 4 years now, 4.5 years. And I decided to break out the computer and just start writing about my experiences and what had happened. And eventually I came along, my publisher is a friend of mine, it's his mom, and she said that she would help me get it published to help me out. So I went ahead and did that, and I've had amazing responses from people and people that I've helped already, and yeah, craziness.
We were, my last interview was with someone named QueenAfi Gaston, and she founded a company called Domestic Violence Wears Many Tags, and what she kind of focused on was that she had been in both positions before she founded, the company. She said she was at first the victim, and then she became the perpetrator. And kind of what we talked all about was what you touched on there, was that for whatever reason, the physical aspect, that's almost entirely, sometimes avoided because that's when, the law becomes involved. But the verbal end of it is just as effective, if not even more, because there's nothing you can do about it. Would you agree with that? And if so, why is it something that, there's no law protecting you from verbal abuse?
Yeah, I agree with that because there are so many people that have responded to me after reading my book, and they're like, they don't understand like the violence part of it. But they tell me their stories where it was just all emotional and being beaten down emotionally, to where they didn't even want to get out of bed because their emotions were so wrecked up.
Yeah.
And I don't know why there can't be some law against it. It would be a great thing if we could say, call the police and be like, hey, this guy is, and it's hard to, because I'm stumbling on my words.
Hey, you're fine.
Having, it's he say, she say.
Yeah.
And that was even something that happened to me, like, calling the police. And if you're the one being crazy, like, all this crazy stuff happened to me, they might just take you away instead of the one that actually...
Yeah, they might...
It was doing stuff, and
yeah,
I don't know.
We were kind of saying how, there's a false stigma, if you will, about, sticks and stones might break my bones, but words will never hurt me, and that's the biggest lie told to our children these days.
Oh, my goodness, yeah.
And that, we should, it starts with teaching them that isn't true, or not teaching them at all at that age, and it starts with our children of trying to find a way to get rid of this.
Yeah, my children will try and say to each other, or my daughter, I hate my brothers, and I'm like, you do not say things like that ever. I go, that hurts their feelings so bad, and what if something happened to them? You'd be so sad.
Yeah.
And I try and teach my kids that you can't talk to people like that, or if, they call one another stupid, which my children are 8, 6, and 4.
Yeah, kids are going to be kids.
And they call each other names. I'm like, that is not okay. You cannot do that.
Yeah, I completely agree. And it's, I always heard that kids are naturally gullible, or what's a better word for it? Slipped my tongue, but basically, they're very open to things, and they're very susceptible, and they're very influential, and they're very it's going to bother me all day now, the word I'm looking for. Naive. Naive is the word. And it's up to the parents to teach the children, you can only take that so far before it's a detriment to you.
Mm-hmm.
So,
most definitely.
So then kind of wrapping up, the book is about you and, your personal story, and people can, read that, and, it's almost the same thing with music. As when people listen to music or when people read a good book they feel connected to, they know they're not alone, and that is one of the biggest strengthening, inspirational things someone can receive, is if they're having these issues, they can read this and say, I'm not alone. Is that kind of what you were having in mind when you started to write it, or was it just you wanted to write it?
Well, at first I just wanted to write it. And then the more it came along the more the story came along, I was thinking, man, I could really help some people out with sharing my own story. And in there, it has signs, like if you have a friend and you don't, because all my friends, I've had a ton of friends, and not one of them knew what I was going through.
Mm.
When you're in that situation, you learn to hide it so well. And I always wore a smile, and my friends are like, I had no idea you were always the happiest, cheeriest person ever. And so in my book, I made a point to talk to your friends about it, and you never know. They could be going through something like that, and they're not going to say anything. And even if you try and confront them, they're probably going to hide from it,
Right, because, calling someone a name or whatever, abusing them emotionally, saying, I think you're worthless, that's not going to give them a black eye. And, your friends aren't going to notice. You can hide it as well as you want to.
Mm-hmm.
So.
But there's I put signs in my book that you can look out for with your friends, or even if you're in a new relationship and you notice things aren't right at the beginning, it explains what to look out for, that the person might go further in the relationship to abuse you.
Yeah, I talked with a previous guest about, a lot of things where you can kind of tell real early on. Like, one of the things they said is how if they're very, committed to you emotionally, like they say they're in love with you so quickly, and you fall in love with them right back, they realize they have that much of an influence over you. They realize early on they can control you.
Yeah, yep, I agree with that, definitely.
So starting to wrap up, where do you hope to be in 5 years, as a person, as a survivor, as an author?
I've been being a part of a lot of domestic violence Facebook groups, and I keep reading more and more about there's places that you can help women, like even near me where I live, there's, I guess, a bunch of places. So I'd like to get more involved one-on-one with people, kind of like counseling. I'd like to go to a school for counseling, be able to help these people with having my own past experience. And other than that, I have my new fiance. I've been with him for quite a while now.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And we'll be getting married next year. So that's going great.
Good. I'm happy for you. And I'm sure so are listeners. So if you knew someone on the other end of this conversation, like somebody is sitting in their bedroom right now listening to, our conversation, and they are a current victim of domestic violence, is there anything you'd want to say to them that, we might not have touched during this conversation?
Yes, that would be just, if you cannot get away by talking to that person saying, hey, I want to leave you, run and just kind of disappear off their map. And I have 3 kids with my ex, and I tried leaving them before, and you get so scared that you can't leave because they have such power over you. And I took the 3 kids and I ran away to a different state to where my family was. And what I suggest is never answering that phone if they call you, never answer a text if it'll just bring you right back into it. And it happens so many times to a ton of different people to where you get right back to where you were by answering that phone call. So if anybody is listening and they are stuck, run and pretend like that person never existed. Just do what you can do, restart your life over, and it'll all work out in best in the long run.
Yeah, that's what we previously touched on too. Is it takes a lot to build up the courage because, as we said, you love the person, but you don't love what they're doing to you, and eventually you just become fed up with it that you just have to leave, and that takes a lot of courage. Don't stand up to the person and say, I want to leave. Just one night, get everything and go, and don't say a word. Do not let them know where you're going, and do not answer them when they contact you.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what you got to do.
So, okay, well, Julia Chesky, I'd like to thank you very much for your time, and I'd especially like to thank you for sharing, some personal things. I know it's not easy, especially to a stranger on the other side of a phone, especially to, someone you'll never, ever, hear from again. But I want to let you know that we appreciate this very, very much, and that you are, a pivotal part to this week. And if there's anything you could ever need from us that we can do for you, you know how to contact us now. So I hope that
Thank you. Yeah.
I hope that someone listening, got something out of this, and I hope you enjoyed it.
Yes, thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Yep, thank you for taking time out of your day to contact us. So, okay.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye now. Okay, everyone. So that was Julia Chesky, a current author, current survivor of domestic violence out on the West Coast. She is an author of a book, Julia's Story, a Memoir, available on Kindle Fire if you want to give it a read. Good readings. I promise you. Yo, I'm a spaceman. I'm so out of it right now, the men in black are gonna come for me because I'm on another planet. I've been doing this for 19 hours, I think. Yeah, 19 hours. Well, 19 hours and 50 minutes. Come 6 o'clock, we will hopefully hear from Mark Wynn, a consultant for victims. And then we will wrap it up at about 7. I'll be on air till about 10. And that is when Dear Kayla will take over. Here on 91.3 FM, WBNY. To wrap up my round of interviews today, I am on the phone with Mark Wynn. Mark, you still there?
I sure am.
How you doing today, Mark?
I'm good. Good, Evan. How are you doing?
I'm good. So just before we got going on this, you said you just landed in Minneapolis. Is that true?
I did. I'm here to do some law enforcement training this week with the Brooklyn Park Police Department.
Okay. Can you tell us what you do for a living?
Well, I travel around the country nationally and actually internationally, and I train police officers, judges, prosecutors, probation, people who work in the criminal justice system who deal with violence against women issues every day.
Mm-hmm. So it's, travel all over the world and meet people that, like you said, deal with domestic violence cases, violence against women specifically, and train them how to handle the cases, to make it clear?
I do. Awareness, how to handle the case, things like stalking, sex assault, human trafficking, domestic violence. It's when you step back and look at most of the crime committed in society, it's committed against women.
Mm-hmm.
And people don't realize that until you talk about the interconnectivity of all these crimes. So I spend most of my time educating people on those issues and how to make sure, two important things, make sure how to hold the offender accountable and how to make the victim safer.
Okay. So when you go around and you're, helping train people to deal with these situations, what would you say is your area of expertise concerning domestic violence?
Well, that's a great question. I don't know if I've got one area of expertise. I've sort of considered sort of a jack of all trades in this area, from on-scene investigation to prosecution to understanding the profile of the offender, to understanding the issues with children. I'm a survivor of domestic violence. I lived with an offender as a child for 10 years, and I took the experience with me into my police work. I'm a retired police lieutenant from Nashville, Tennessee. So it's just more of making people aware. If there were one particular thing, I guess you would say, it's just awareness and an understanding of why the victims do what they do and what they live in day in, day out.
Okay. Would you say your experience as a victim helps you now in your career and it influences how you help people?
Oh, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
It actually, not only does it help me, it's the very reason that I got into this work. I started policing in the mid-'70s and retired in 2001. And all through my years as a police officer and an instructor, and now as a consultant, that informs everything that I do. That experience of living with an offender, being hopeless, helpless, and not being able to protect my mom and my family really impacted me in big ways.
Mm-hmm. So if you go online and just, Google Mark Wynn, you automatically first hit, boom, markwynn.com, and the big logo at the top is Wynn Consulting. Can you tell us about Wynn Consulting?
Well, it's a company of three, and, I started my company in 2001 after I left the Nashville Metropolitan Police Department. I was a lieutenant there, and we created the largest domestic violence police investigative unit in U.S. history in Nashville.
Oh, wow.
And when I retired, I took that expertise with me, and what Wynn Consulting can do for, communities and organizations is to take a look at where they are, where they want to be, and how they get there around issues of preventing violence against women.
Mm-hmm. So when it comes to preventing violence against women and training these officers and, different representatives how to handle it, what are you telling them, and what are you, the techniques that you're training people to use, is there anything that an everyday person would be able to pick up?
Oh, absolutely. Now, I think, for the most part, people who work in government service are not there because, they want to make a lot of money. They're there because they care about people. Mm-hmm. So it's up to me to show them, the path that the victim walks, the methods that the offender uses day in and day out. And in order for them to improve their services, be it a judge or a prosecutor or a police officer or an advocate. So, I spend quite a bit of time helping people see that side that, a lot of times when people talk about domestic violence, the first thing, if they don't understand it, no matter where they work, one of the things they first say is, well, why didn't she just leave? Well, Evan, leaving is not an event. It's a process. Mm-hmm. And everybody that I talk to day in and day out, and have since 1975, I've talked to them about what their responsibility is in that process of her getting out.
Mm-hmm. A lot of people I've talked to today, I've done a lot of rounds of interviews today, and they've said the main idea is that it's not an overnight process and that it takes a lot of courage because 9 times out of 10, they love the person, they just don't love the act that they do. Would you agree with that and be able to elaborate on it?
Oh, absolutely. It's one of the things that you, as a police officer, you won't hear a victim of burglary or robbery say, please don't arrest him, I love him, mm-hmm. unless they're mentally disturbed. But with domestic violence, that's why people get together. They do love one another. I'm from the South. We have a lot of colloquialisms, and one of the things that I tell my students often that if it was against the law to pick the wrong person as a mate, half of us would be in jail.
Right.
So you have to factor that in, that the person, they do love these people. But the behavior of the offender, that's not love. And it's up to us to bring that to the victim's attention, to tell them that these things do get worse, and it's not about them. It's about the offender. It's about the offender's choice.
Right. So when you were still a police officer, or even now, would you say that you face barriers in the field when it comes to helping people? Like you would always, go to a house or something and, the poor wife's got a black eye or something and she's like, he hit me, but I don't want to press charges. And all you can do is shake your head. You're trying to help them. Are there certain barriers even now when it comes to trying to help people with this issue?
There aren't as many barriers today as when I started policing in the 70s, when we would go to the scene and there were no criminal codes that defined domestic violence. Today, and I've trained in every state in the country and 12 other countries, in the United States, almost every criminal code in every state gives the officer the option to take the burden off the shoulders of the victim. Now, we certainly understand that, we don't want to hurt the victim. We want the victim to be part of this process, but at the same time, we don't want that victim to be harmed and sometimes killed. So the police are given the options and the responsibility to take the person into custody if they believe they've committed a crime.
Mm-hmm.
And that, overall, in the last 30 years, we've had victims tell us that was a wonderful thing because they didn't have the courage or they were too afraid to go forward for a lot of reasons.
Yeah. And like I, touched on before, a primary reason is that they love the person but not the act. And other reasons are financial reasons. A lot of these people are stuck there because they're not educated, they don't have jobs, and so they're stuck with their abuser because they're the financial stability. What, as a someone who goes in to train these people, what can the police do about that to help these people?
Well, one of the things that we are doing around the country, and we certainly did it with my community of Nashville, is to look at the whole victim. What do they need? It's not just that moment, and that's important. Immediate safety is important. That's what law enforcement often will do. But how do we get that victim to social services? How do we get them to food stamps and WIC or job training or housing? My wife in Nashville is a director of the largest domestic and sexual violence transitional housing program in the state of Tennessee. And it's called the Mary Parrish Center, and it's named after my mother. And she brings families into her multifamily dwelling for 2 years. And they work on parenting classes and job training and job placement and all those things that bring a victim back up to on their feet so they can navigate through their life. But it takes a lot. It's not just the arrest. It starts with us. If you could say, who are the police in this process? Most often the police are the gatekeepers. They open the gate for the victim to walk through to safety on the other side of a community that reaches out and offers all the services. Just like you said, and you're right. It's money, it's shelter, it's food, it's clothing, and it's safety. And the police can start that process.
Yeah. So even when we sit down to talk about domestic violence, according to the dictionary, the definition is acts of violence or abuse against a person living in one's household, especially a member of one's immediate family. Do you think there's more to the definition that's, kind of like a social, unwritten rule, or do you think that that's spot on? That's what domestic violence is. If you are under that situation, you need to, realize it.
No, I think that's a good start. I think that domestic violence extends out past the family. I think it can be neighbors, it can be the responding police officers, it can be anybody who's impacted by the violent behavior of the offender. Mm-hmm. But for definition, a family household member, someone married to, someone who has adopted someone who is an in-law, I think. We can't just narrow this down just to one or two people. These offenders often will have an impact on more than one person in their life. Mm-hmm. And by the way, just to give you an example of the danger of these crimes, every 18 months we lose as many people killed in domestic violence in this country as we lost in 9/11. Mm-hmm. And
that is insane.
It's an incredible number. I was just in Brazil training down there. I was training the federal police in Brazil, and I took a look at their numbers, and in 10 years, they've lost 50,000 women killed in domestic violence situations. Mm-hmm. So the crime is the same everywhere around the world. The people are certainly different. The culture is different, but the act of the violence in the home is the same wherever you go.
Okay. So you mentioned when you go around, the world, the people and the cultures are different. Are there different laws around the world that you have to be keeping in mind while you're training these people?
I do, and a good example would be Brazil. They just enacted a few years ago in Brazil a law called the Maria da Penha law, which is a very close copy of our Violence Against Women Act that was passed by Congress in the 90s. And it's very similar. In Australia, the criminal code is very similar. In Germany, in Ireland, and even in Russia, the criminal codes are starting to look uniform around the country. And these are laws that are similar that govern different cultures. So, and by the way, let me say this too, Evan. You hear a lot of people say that, well, those people, their culture. I have not yet been to a country where if you were to ask someone about their culture, they would say, our culture is about abusing women and children.
Right. Yeah, no one's
I
going to
think
flat out say
it's
that.
often it's used as an excuse.
So then when we talk about different cultures and different laws with physicalities, why don't you think that non-physical attacks and non-physical violence is taken more seriously? I was discussing earlier with a different interviewee who said, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me is the greatest misconception of all time. But there's truly no laws against that, because at that point it's a matter of he said, she said. Do you think there's a possible solution? Because obviously there is mental and emotional abuse. You can tell someone, they're stupid and worthless all day, but at the end of the day, that's not going to give them a black eye for the world to see.
Well, it's a great question, and there's a couple of things that are encouraging. First, we're training law enforcement today to understand what trauma looks like. And when you physically or psychologically abused, you experience and you often will exhibit trauma.
Mm-hmm.
We want our officers to understand what that looks like so they can identify it and write it in the reports that tells the victim, we understand what you've been through. And this is certainly true with sex assault, but for the things that aren't physical, the socio-psychological behavior, to me, is damaging. I know that there are researchers now who look at brain development of children at 6 and 7 and 8 months old, even that early, who say that the toxic the environment that a child lives in will come back to impact them when they're 10 and 15 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Because it does shape the development of your brain. So we're teaching officers these techniques, and this is all fairly new to law enforcement. The other thing is, I'm watching around the world, actually, in places that I've been, people talk more and more about human rights, not just domestic violence. When you deny someone, the ability to go to the church they want to go to, or wear clothing they like to wear, or food, or, when you start impacting women, where it shapes their trajectory in life, where they can't go to college, they're always pregnant. These are human rights violations in some countries today. We're just now beginning to talk about it, and it's a great book out. I've read it several times. I recommend it to people by a researcher at Rutgers named Evan Stark. And the book is Coercive Control, and it talks a lot about what you mentioned, that these things are horrible events that happen, but people aren't often held accountable for them.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned how certain countries are introducing different, human rights laws. Are there certain countries that you've been to or experienced that have better laws related to this, and laws that other countries should take example from and learn from them because they're, realistically better off?
That's another great question. I'd have to say that the English are doing a lot of work in third-party reporting of crimes, how to work with people who report crimes of domestic violence and sex assault. I know the Canadians are so wonderful. They were doing some really innovative work in Canada around the impacts on children and women in domestic violence cases. We didn't invent domestic violence in the United States, but I think we've perfected it to a pretty high level. So, we're trying a lot of things, but also there's a lot of other countries that are closely looking at domestic violence. I haven't been, but I understand the folks in New Zealand have a very, very wide-eyed view of violence against women, and they're doing some great things. I trained in Australia several times, and they certainly are taking it serious. So I'm excited. All the years I've done this work, I've never been in a place now where I could say that a lot of really, really, really great minds are working on violence against women and children.
Yeah, because, I am younger. I am in college still. But it's at the same time, you talk to people that are older, and it seems like for years and years and years and years, it was the wife is the wife, and she's basically the prostitute to these husbands. The husbands go and work and then come home and do what they will with the wife, and that was it. And that was just the culture everyone seemed to be raised in until recently. And now, there's the feminism movement, and people just don't understand. Feminism is the radical notion that women are people too.
Well, you can call me a feminist then. I certainly think that the fight to end male privilege and entitlement is a lifelong work. This is at the core of these crimes. If your offender is male, now there are female offenders too. I mean, the numbers aren't nearly as high as male offenders.
Right. Yeah, I wanted to talk soon because I do actually know someone who is a male victim to a female.
Sure. Absolutely. And by the way, that's reflected in the law. When you look at the law in New York or Tennessee or Texas, the law is gender blind, and for that very reason. So there are female offenders as well. But when we're talking about male on female crime, a lot of this is about intergenerational hand-downs from one father to one son, and I think it's our job to stop that handoff from one to the other. And the formula that I often use is that gentle pressure relentlessly applied, which is to constantly every day talk about this, and not only talk about it, but what kind of model are we, you and I, as men, what kind of modeling are we doing for other young men?
Right, because people always say how children are naive and they just learn from whatever their parents or whoever they're around, and they don't think anything of it. They think because mom and dad do it, it's perfectly normal.
Well, I think I go back to my memory of reading one of Mark Twain's novels, and I think he said that little boys start to imitate a man at about the age of 12 and just keep doing that the rest of their lives. And the question is, who are they imitating?
Right.
And I think it's pretty clear, and I've seen it in my career. Certainly it's what my stepfather wanted for me. He wanted me to be him, and it didn't work out. I became his worst nightmare as an offender. Because I've told everybody, that I could talk to about what my experience was as a child and how he wanted me to be an offender, but it didn't work.
Right. So when these people are in the situations and, it's occurring right then and there, your husband or your wife or whoever, your parent, is going in to hit you, what would you say to someone who is in that situation right then and there? What is the first step?
Well, that's a good question. As it comes up often with law enforcement, I certainly think everybody has a right to self-defense. I think that if you find yourself in an abusive relationship, you certainly should start today by preparing to get out. And that means having an escape plan, have a safety plan, have a little money set aside.
Right.
Tell a friend, find someone who understands and is patient, who's willing to work with you. There is safety on the other side. There are people who are specialists who will help you navigate to get out. Just those early steps, those first moments where you decide to get out, there are people who specialize in those moments. So you want to help people before it gets to the point of physical assault. And I think part of what we're training police officers to do now today is to help that victim understand their risk. 500 police departments nationwide now are using what's called a risk or lethality assessment. And we'll go to the scene and we'll ask the victim certain questions, and it's a scientifically balanced instrument that will help us give the victim their best advice so it doesn't turn into that moment where you find yourself being physically assaulted.
Right, because oftentimes these cases don't start off as, we were all lovey-dovey, and then all of a sudden one night he snapped and he's beating me against the wall. It doesn't start off like that. And I think a lot of people think, oh, it was just once and he was just mad. And people don't recognize the early warning signs of something that can turn into something really bad like this.
No, you're right. The physical abuse is part of the controlling method. We wouldn't have this telephone conversation today if on first dates, the offender said, "I like you," and then they punch you in the face.
Right.
We wouldn't be talking about it. But on the other side of this, too, for people like you and me and a lot of your listeners, if women could stop domestic violence, we wouldn't be having this conversation. So it's up to us as men to step up and say enough is enough, and to build into our culture a culture of nonviolence against women and children.
Right. And I think a lot of it is unintentionally glorified. Like, say, the NFL this year had a really bad year because 3 or 4 of their players all, are beating up their wives, fiancés, etc. We all know who they are. And it's all you hear about every day in the sports news, at least world, is what's going on with them. Well, you hear every day about how they hit them. Eventually you think, well, they're $1 million athlete. What's the difference between me and them? I look up to them and they did this, so it might be a subliminal thing.
Well, it's first of all, I understand why people would admire, professional athletes, but, there are heroes around us that we can admire who deserve our attention much more than a pro athlete, believe me.
Right, I completely agree with you. Athletes don't impress me too much.
Yeah, no, they're exceptional people. There's no question about it. But there are people who in society, the person who, without broadcasting it, you'll see them standing in the soup kitchen at the Salvation Army, late at night, and he has a second job somewhere. Someone who walks into the Red Cross and gets blood and nobody knows about it. The person who takes a little money out of their pocket to help a child, eat another meal. That's the heroes in this country, not the people who catch a ball.
Right.
And those are the people we should be modeling ourselves after. Now, if you want to run fast, great. And if you want to be a professional athlete, more power to you. But, the core of you should be, always talking about, equality and safety for our family.
Mm-hmm. So do you have an end goal in mind, like what you want to accomplish before your career is over? Do you have, a goal, a accomplishment, an aspiration? Is there anything you want to say, I did this before you are done?
Well, that's first of all, let me say that I want to be able to look back on my life and say it was meaningful, that I did impact folks. I do know. I know this for a fact that, but for some of the things that I've done in my life, I have saved lives. I mean, that's one of the reasons I got into policing. I feel blessed that I could be able to say that I know directly. If I had not been at this spot at this time, this person would have not survived it. So in that sense, I feel like, it's been a pretty good ride so far.
Mm-hmm.
But I've got a lot I want to do yet. My career is not over. I want young men and women to pick up the mantle and go forward, because I'm just part of the foundation. That's it. I mean, when you're building a foundation for a safer community, you have to understand that there's a part that you play, and the part that you play is no small thing. And this is, to me, in my mind, our modern day civil rights issue. And when I think about the courageous things that Medgar Evers did, and Rosa Parks and Dr. King and Lowry and all those folks who worked so hard just to get basic human rights for African Americans, I feel like we're in that same battle today. Now, a lot of people don't identify it that way, but I certainly do.
Yeah, and kind of something me and my brother were kind of joking about is, history always repeats itself. Well, first there was the African American civil rights movement, and then there was the women's rights movement. We finally got to that, and now currently, finally we have an African American president. And what could, a potential female president do for this stigma against domestic violence? Because I'm sure that would be, a forefront issue if someone was to run.
Well, let me tell you that I don't want to get too political with you, but I can tell you this, that Hillary Clinton was responsible for a lot of anti-violence programs around the world. She signed agreements with countries like Brazil that offered up all of the expertise of our country to their country and others on how to deal with violence against women. When President Clinton was in the White House, he signed into law the Violence Against Women Act, which changed everything for this movement. When you have our government, your government, my government, when they create an office called the Violence Against Women Office, that says a lot.
Exactly.
And Vice President Biden basically wrote the Violence Against Women Act. So we've got responsible politicians. And by the way, it was bipartisan as well. I know Senator Hatch, he was a co-signer of the original Violence Against Women Act. So I'm encouraged. I think, we've come a long, 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 long way. And it's been thousands of years of oppression of women. It's going to take us more than 20 to finally put an end to it.
Yeah, nothing is, especially with something that's so institutionalized, nothing is ever going to be overnight, especially when it's been years and years and years and generations of, borderline oppression. That's what it is boiled down to.
Well, going back to your example of African Americans, it was slavery for several hundred years, and then Jim Crow for another 100, and we're still not where we should be.
Right.
But I think we at least have got to do our part to move total freedom, to a point to where women can say, I don't deserve this. I don't deserve to be treated this way. And, my community supports me, and that's what we should all be doing. And one day, you hope that, 30 years from now, there'll be a radio show, from your station, and they'll say, what they used to do back, 30 years ago, they actually had to investigate rapes and domestic violence cases and child abuse and elder abuse cases. And, I hope that they've got good things to say about us, Evan. I believe they will.
Yeah. If every generation there's a small change, eventually it will accomplish years and years and years from now.
Oh, I feel that to be absolutely true. If I didn't feel that, I wouldn't be doing the work that I'm doing.
Exactly. We wouldn't be doing this week-long event.
Right.
So is there anything else that we didn't touch up on that you would like to add? Anything to say to anyone who might be listening that's a victim? Anything that you want to just parting thoughts?
Well, first of all, there's hope. Don't give up. There are communities all over this country who have helping people who are patient and kind and will help you get out. As I said earlier, no one deserves to be treated this way. It's not your fault. There's freedom on the other side, and there are a lot of people there. And it's not just an underground railroad; it's a true, above ground railroad of people who are willing to help you escape and live a healthy and free life.
Wow, that is quite the wrapper-upper to the day.
Well, thank you very much.
I'm beyond words. Thank you very much, Mark Quinn. You are a gentleman and a scholar.
I appreciate that very much. Thank you.
Thank you for your time. We appreciate it.
Okay.
Have a good one.
All right, you too, Evan. Thanks.
Yep, thank you. Mark Wynn, everyone, from Mark Wynn Consulting. I can honestly say I'm kind of blown away right now and don't know how I feel about that. I think we could all use a little bit of time to kind of reflect. I'm kind of tired, and I don't know how I feel about anything. Why am I so emotional? You guys ever hear that song? Kind of sounds like a song by the Police or something. If you speed it up or something, it's like, I don't know, somebody was playing it for me the other day. It made no sense.
91.3 FM WBNY Buffalo would like to present Week of the Warriors from 10 p.m. Sunday, March 22nd. We will be having DJs go 24 hours straight for an entire week. That's 7 days to help raise awareness against domestic violence. There will be a ton of interviews, including Glorified Thursday, which will be a day full of bands coming in and playing over the air, just like our glorified rehearsals on the local show. Kicking it off Wednesday night at 10 p.m. with Legion Reed and the Sleepy Ha-Has. Join us for the Week of the Warriors here on 91.3 FM WBNY Buffalo.